Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Tan. Mr. Tan has been a senior counsel since 1999, where he was appointed by the Supreme Court of Singapore. A leading light in the field of intellectual property, Mr. Tan has been involved in numerous landmark cases, has written several articles on competition and intellectual property laws, and is a regular speaker at both international and local conferences, along with many other accolades. In the earlier days of the virus, Mr. Tan wrote a very insightful and foreboding article in the Straits Times, warning about the growing trend of vaccine nationalism. The article confronted the uneasy questions on whether intellectual property laws actually prioritize the interests of pharmaceutical over public health needs. He is sure to lend invaluable insights to the topic. Thank you, Mr. Tan, once again for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now delve into the meat of the issue. Mr. Tan, can you tell us what exactly vaccine nationalism is?
Well, as we all know, the term nationalism connotes devotion or loyalty to a country or nation. So it also connotes the idea of supporting or upholding the interests or the cause of that country or nation, probably to the detriment of the interest or the cause of another country or another nation. Therefore, nationalism essentially means each country or each nation fending for itself. Therefore, in the context of vaccine nationalism, it means that it is up to each nation or country to obtain or to purchase as much COVID-19 vaccine as possible for its citizens and for its residents. If this means that other countries or other nations would be unable to obtain what is obviously a limited supply of the vaccine, so be it. So it is another form of each country and each nation fending for itself. Therefore, vaccine nationalism in a way encourages or promotes selfishness and encourages countries to be involved in a race to obtain as much vaccine for itself and for its citizens. Now, this is not only morally wrong and unfair, but it is also the wrong way of overcoming the current COVID-19 pandemic. Now, as you know, the pandemic is a worldwide problem, and therefore it should be resolved on a worldwide basis with the participation of all countries and all nations. What has happened now is that there has been extensive vaccine nationalism practiced by certain countries in terms of the hoarding of the vaccine. They practice the vaccine nationalism by hoarding the vaccine or entering into agreements to try to hoard the vaccine as much as possible for their own countries. Now, since my article in May, this nationalism has become even worse. You might have read of the US, UK, Russia, and the EU entering into agreements, multi-billion-dollar agreements with the pharmaceutical companies to secure vaccine supplies for themselves. For example, the US ordered enough vaccine to provide for more than 2 doses for every citizen. And I understand that the UK has entered into contracts to secure about 340 million doses, which is about 5 doses for each citizen. Now, this all seems to be rather selfish and certainly a wrong way of overcoming the current pandemic problem.
Yes, okay, so I can see how vaccine nationalism is not really beneficial to anyone, even to the countries that practice it. And it is ironic that against the pandemic that has no regard for borders, governments and individuals alike are in a frantic rush to hoard solutions to the novel disease. But aside from engaging in these self-preserving practices, is there a real alternative?
Well, the WHO, World Health Organization, is currently leading a worldwide effort to try to get as many countries as possible to join its COVAX program. Now, this is a program to fund the development and the supply of the COVID-19 vaccine. And it is a program that, if sustainable, if it is sustained, will ensure fair and equitable distribution of the vaccine worldwide. Now, WHO is trying to encourage as many countries as possible to contribute financially to the program, so that once the vaccine becomes available, WHO has the resources to ensure that the COVID-19 vaccine is equitably and fairly distributed to all countries. So that is a laudable method of distribution, and most medical experts agree that COVAX is the best method, is the most promising method of ensuring fair and equitable distribution of the vaccine worldwide.
COVAX will definitely be a remarkable demonstration of global solidarity if it works out, but as per recent development, the US already declared that it will reject the invitation to participate. So why would richer countries like the UK participate at all instead of signing their own deals with pharmaceutical manufacturers?
Well, the countries that sign the agreements with the pharmaceutical manufacturers, such as, for example, Pfizer or AstraZeneca, there's no assurance that these companies will come up with a vaccine, isn't it? Whereas the COVAX program is sort of an insurance policy. It doesn't depend on any particular pharmaceutical company, the success of any pharmaceutical company. If, for example, one pharmaceutical company comes up with a vaccine, COVAX will then come in and try to engage that particular company to sell it as cheaply as possible. So COVAX is sort of an insurance policy whereby all countries have a stake in getting the vaccine. Whereas if you sign individual agreements with a particular pharmaceutical company and pay the particular company, there is no guarantee that at the end, that company will come up with a vaccine. Maybe another company will come up with a vaccine.
So now, what exactly is the tension between IP law and vaccine nationalism?
Well, first, for the benefit of the audience, let me explain what is IP law. IP law is essentially a law to protect the creative and inventive efforts of authors, designers, inventors for a limited period of time, in exchange for them disclosing the fruits of their efforts, for example, the information concerning the invention. In particular, patents law protect inventions, and it protects invention for a period of 20 years. And after that period, the inventions then become public domain, which means that it is available, that invention is available for use by any other people, by any other person. That's why many people say that inventions, those notable inventions, sit on the shoulders of earlier inventions. Thus, in that sense, a patented invention does not benefit the inventor only, but ultimately mankind, in the sense that when an invention becomes public domain, mankind gets to use the particular invention for free. Now that is the purpose, the underlying purpose of a patent. On the other hand, vaccine nationalism, as I said earlier on, promotes and encourages selfishness. So in that sense, there is indeed a tension between IP law and vaccine nationalism.
So it seems like IP law is actually an obstacle to public health interests. It's no secret that pharmaceutical companies are notorious for filing patents against one another to hike prices and decrease affordable access to medicines. So why then, in your article, do you still advocate so strongly for the IP system?
Well, let me say first that IP law is not actually an obstacle to public health interests or public health concerns. Actually, the fundamental underlying premise of the IP system is that it is an incentive and reward scheme. The system incentivizes creators, as I said, creators and inventions to come up with new works, to come up with new inventions, and then rewards them by giving them a monopoly for a period of time. And during that period of time, the inventor can obtain monetary or other benefits. Probably they will obtain a license fee or royalty for their inventions, and they deserve it. Nobody is quibbling about that. On the other hand, without such a system, without such a scheme, an incentive and reward scheme, there will not be any, or there are not likely to be any new inventions or new works. And mankind will not stand to benefit from it. In fact, mankind has been progressing over or during these years because there were new inventions. Think of the modern inventions that we have around us, the washing machine, smartphones. All these inventions make our lives and the way that we work, the way that we live easier. So I would not want to jeopardize this incentive and reward scheme. Now, as far as COVID-19 vaccine is concerned, developing a vaccine, as we all know, is a costly and time-consuming process. There's no guarantee that any of the pharmaceutical companies that undertake the process of trying to come up with a vaccine will succeed. Now, if there is no incentive and reward scheme, no pharmaceutical company will want to undertake that investment because it is a very risky investment. As I say, it's a very costly invention. No pharmaceutical company will want to do that. So you need the incentive and reward scheme which underpins the IP system to encourage the pharmaceutical companies to undertake the risky work of coming up with a COVID-19 vaccine. Now, besides, and that's why I say I disagree with you that IP law is an obstruction to public health concerns. The IP system has enough carve-outs in the system which cater to public health concerns. In particular, for example, there are compulsory licensing provisions in most IP systems, in most IP laws. Singapore is one. We have a compulsory licensing regime under our Patents Act. So I would not say that the IP system is an obstruction to public health concerns arising from COVID-19.
I see. So the IP system is already flexible enough to accommodate the exigencies of public health emergencies. So let's talk a bit more about compulsory licensing. If compulsory licensing allows countries to bypass conventional patent laws and gain access to any working drug in a health crisis, then why is vaccine nationalism still such a salient concern?
Let me first explain what is compulsory licensing and how does compulsory licensing works. Compulsory licensing is a regime whereby a country enacts in its law that allows generic or other companies, such as generic pharmaceutical companies, to manufacture and sell the patented drugs. Especially if the pharmaceutical company that owns the patents does not adequately supply the drugs in the particular country. So for instance, let's say in Singapore, there's a drug X, which is in great demand in Singapore, but the patentee doesn't have enough supply of the drugs to cater to our public health concern. So a generic company can then ask the government for a compulsory license to enable it to manufacture and supply the drug in Singapore. Without that license, the generic company would be in infringement of the patent. So there's a compulsory license regime that allows these generic drugs to do so. The problem is that most generic drugs are not as well resourced as the major pharmaceutical companies. They may not have the resources to come up with all the equipment and technical expertise or resources to, for example, in this case, to manufacture COVID-19. So that would be an obstacle, and that would then allow vaccine nationalism to be carried on.
Thank you, Mr. Tan. Would you then say that ultimately the problem lies in the increasingly nationalistic attitudes of nations and in the unequal spread of wealth on a global scale?
Precisely. I entirely agree with you. In fact, only recently, I think a few days ago, US announced that it will not participate in the COVAX program that we mentioned about. Its reason for doing so was that it was an initiative of the WHO, and currently it has this spat with the WHO because it claims that WHO is very much engaged with China, or is a proponent of China. I think, in my honest view, such selfishness and politics should not come in the way of trying to promote fair and equitable distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine worldwide. That is not the solution to the issue.
I guess it's no wonder why the biggest subscribers of vaccine nationalism are the China and the US, countries whose COVID response measures were gravely lacking and are now determined to posture to their own countries that they have the inherent strength to tide the nation through. So, given that countries are becoming increasingly protectionist, do you think that the state of vaccine nationalism will be worse than it was for H1N1?
I fear that it will be worse because during the days of H1N1, at least globalization was in full bloom. But now globalization is on the wane. And this kind of atmosphere, encourages vaccine nationalism to sprout and even to prosper. So I entirely agree with you there.
So it is clear that vaccine nationalism is going to be a very, very big problem for the international community and the UN. But bringing it back to the people watching, why is it that Singapore should care?
We should care because if indeed vaccine nationalism is practiced worldwide and is in full bloom, it means that the other countries, the major countries can have all the vaccines for themselves. Whereas the better method of distribution would be that most or all countries should be able to have a share of the vaccine to protect, for example, their senior citizens first, or to protect their healthcare workers. There should be a sort of a hierarchy of needs that should be met first, rather than some of the major countries hoarding the vaccines for themselves. So we should be concerned about this issue if this vaccine nationalism becomes more widespread than it is.
Okay, thank you so much for your insights, Mr. Tan. It has been our pleasure to speak with you. For more of Mr. Tan's commentary on the matter, do check out his article on the Straits Times, Will Global IP System Block Access to Vaccine? So thank you so much for watching and stay safe.
Thank you so much indeed.